Yeah, we're in chapter 17 of Masechet Shabbat, Mishnah Dalet, Mishnah 4. רבי יוסי אומר, כל הכלים ניטלין, חוץ מן המסר הגדול והיתד של מחרשה. That we've already reviewed. He says all the utensils could be used and carried on Shabbat, except for המסר הגדול, a big saw or cross saw, והיתד של מחרשה, and the plow's blade. Because those two are too big, there's nothing that you could use them for at home. How did we get from here? This is what the Mishnah says. Basically says, there's nothing that you cannot carry on Shabbat. No such thing. No, that you cannot touch on Shabbat. You can touch any object, any utensil. But if you look at the halachot of Muktzeh today, you go through, there are certain different books, Shemirat Shabbat Kirchata, Menuchat Ahava, Aseh Lecharav, Yilkut Yosef, all these books, Shulchan Aruch, you realize there's a long list of things that are Muktzeh and you cannot touch. Now, Muktzeh literally means set aside. This is something that you're not planning to touch on Shabbat. So you could think of our common household. There are many things that you wouldn't touch on Shabbat. But on the other hand, there are many things that even though you don't have use for on Shabbat, sometimes you'll have to move around to make place for another thing, to take this, to touch that. So how did we get from a point where the Mishnah says you could move any utensil on Shabbat, to the point where today there's so many limitations when you look at halakha. I'll give you two interesting examples. One is the issue of playing ball on Shabbat. Among many Orthodox Jews, there's a belief that you cannot play ball on Shabbat. More among the Sfaradim than the Ashkenazim. Now, I grew up in Yerushalayim. Everybody played ball on Shabbat. Everybody. Lo betar. I'm talking about the streets, not going to the stadium. Of course, betar Yerushalayim, but you're going not to the stadium. In the street, we play stanga. With tennis ball, footballs, basketballs. The rabbis, nobody said anything. They've been pushing it in the last couple of decades. Where does it come from? There are dispute between the Tosafot and the Shulchan Aruch whether a ball is Muktzeh on Shabbat. Why would it be Muktzeh? They say this is something that you don't want to touch on Shabbat. So in the recent generations, because ball games became such a public thing and almost a religion, I think the rabbis are more insistent on it. They're trying to prevent it, especially in some places where it's summer resort towns where people are spending the whole summer. So they even have tournaments on Shabbat. So they're trying to limit it, so they clung into this prohibition. They say that the ball... Go ahead.
Doesn't it depend if it's like a friendly game versus you have a league
yes,
and you're trying...
100%. So you're right. So Gary's right. It matters whether you do a friendly game or if it's a league. But the thing is not about... It could be a tournament, but it should not be something that you do for money. Either placing bets or being paid or anything like that. That it does not apply on Shabbat. And there's actually a very famous, maybe not very famous, but an important response by Rabbi Muktzeh. He was from Turkey, lived in Tzfat in the 16th century. And he speaks about a city where people used to play ball on Shabbat. And he's very upset with those people. He curses them. He says... But he says that because they had a professional league, they were placing bets, and they were playing Jews, non-Jews together. Following the game, they would go and sit and drink together in pubs. So of course, very upset. But he says, "Aval behinam." But if you do it as a friendly game, behinam mutar. No one argues that it's okay. And he's a Sephardi rabbi. So why would they think it was a muktzeh? Because they said it's mehamat mi'uz. It's something disgusting that you don't want to touch. So go back and ask yourself, what was the ball that they used to play with back then? It was basically the intestines of a cow or a pig blown up. This is definitely something that you don't want to hold in.
That's the way they used to make sports?
Yeah. In the time of the Gemara, it's written. If you think about something that you could inflate easily, that's what you could inflate. You take a piece of intestine, like so anyway. But so here's an example of something that if according to the law of the Mishnah, Kol kelim, it's a keli, it's an object, you can move it. Then there's, some people could argue it's not the kli, but they actually refer to a bowl as a kli because they say you could use it to put as a stopper on the top of a bottle, at least to prevent bugs or other things from falling into it. So a small bowl could be al pitz lohid. Another interesting example from much, much later is that of a watch, a pocket watch. When the watches came out, I mean, they have been around for a while, but only in the 1300s, or I think 1400s, they started moving towards making personal watches that you could carry with you. And slowly, it spread slowly from the very wealthy to the whole nation. So originally, the rabbis were against it. They said it's Muktzeh. It's not something that you use. It should not be used on Shabbat. And slowly, it made its way into the halakha. Now, no one argues that you have any watch on Shabbat. Probably for a very practical reason, because the rabbis themselves saw how practical it is. You have to give a shiur on Shabbat. You know exactly when to go, when to end, when to start. Meanwhile, at the time of the Gemara, we have a story of the rabbis made a mistake. The rabbis and the Talmidim made a mistake and prayed for Motzei Shabbat 2 hours before Shabbat was over, because it was Yom HaMe'una and it was a cloudy day. So they couldn't tell. They thought it was so dark. They thought it was already sunset. So they realized the importance of measuring time, and they let the watch in sort of through the back door. So, but the question really is why would it even be a problem if the Mishnah says clearly you could carry anything letzorech or letzorech? So the end of the Mishnah is this: Kol hakelim nitalim letzorech v'shelo letzorech. You could take any utensil, whether you need it letzorech or you don't need it v'shelo letzorech. Rabbi Nehemiah Omer, en nitalin ela letzorech. You could only move them if you need them. Fine. So that makes sense. So don't go and arrange your shed on Shabbat and organize everything. It seems like that's what they're saying. But you look at the Talmud Yerushalmi. The Talmud says the following. It says what is considered a need, what is not a need. So they said this: letzorech gufo, shelo letzorech, lo letzorech gufo. Letzorech means if you need it, you need to use it. Shelo letzorech if you don't need to use it. Another person says there's another level of need. There's a tzorech, a need of letzorech mekomo. I don't need the object, but I need to use the place where the object is. So let's say I have a hammer on the table. I need to eat on the table. Okay, move the hammer aside. I don't need the hammer itself. Okay, to move it to the side. Then the third level of need, and that is mehamal etzel. I don't need to use it. I don't need the place where it is, but I want to protect it from the sun. Let's say I left a chair in the sun. I know that it's going to affect the colors of the fabric. I want to bring it in. So some say it's called a need. Some say, no, it's not a need. You don't need anything from the chair. You want to protect it. It's maybe loss of money in the long term. You cannot do it. So the development was such that in the Talmud Yerushalmi, they said that the dispute in the Mishnah between the two rabbis, rabbi-ovadia and Rabbi Nehemiah, was that rabbi-ovadia says you could take anything whether you need it or you don't need it at all, and Rabbi Nehemiah says only if you need either the actual utensil to use it for something, or you need the place. But if you need just to move it from the sun to shade, you cannot do it. Then the Talmud Bavli in Bavel added another layer and says that even the rabbi-ovadia says that you can only take it if you have immediate need of that vessel, but not if you need to move it from sun to shade. Even him will say that it's forbidden. And the more strict opinion, that of Rabbi Nehemiah, is that you could only use it, could only move it if you need it for the specific use of that utensil. Now, so that how with every generation they became more strict. It's the reverse of the process that the Mishnah mentions. Meaning, when we look from about the 3rd, 2nd century before the Common Era, that was a time where people did not respect the Shabbat. So the rabbis wanted to instill the respect for Shabbat. What did they do? They started saying that certain utensils cannot be touched on Shabbat. And once they made the prohibition on the utensil, for people it was a more palpable, more physical thing that they could relate to. So okay, I'm not touching it. Once they don't touch it, they don't do the forbidden work that could be performed with it. Once the rabbi saw that it took root and people stopped transgressing Shabbat, they lifted the ban on using utensils, and this, what we did here in the Mishnah. You could use any utensil except for the big cross saw and the plow's blade. However, with time, they added more prohibitions, not because people became lenient, but because of a natural process of legislation. Whenever you write a law down, you start trying to phrase the law, someone will come and ask, and what about this? And there will be all kind of variations. Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, who was a Talmid of Ramban, lived in Spain, Castilla, in the 14th century, wrote that there's no way that you could write a book of halakha or a book of law that will encompass all possible ramifications. It's impossible. Rambam, hundreds of years before him, already said it in a different way. He said, I will teach you the general rules, and with them you will know the application. I mean, the way to teach halakha is not to say, okay, there's something called Muktzeh. By the way, today there are books like that, Muktzeh, and by alphabetical order, any possible object you could think of, whether it's Muktzeh or not. This is not how halakha should have functioned. Should have been, you realize that if you need something on Shabbat, you move it. If you don't need it, don't move it. That's it, khalas. But people are asking questions, what if it's a precious thing? What if it's this? So they said, no, maybe this. And in this utensil, in this situation, don't use. So eventually, the best solution is, let's say that everything is forbidden. And that's how we got to the situations where we are today. Now, we read the next Mishnah, and not only we see that they were more lenient about moving stuff around, but that they lived in a completely different reality. I said this Mishnah with Edna, my wife. She says, "What? Why would they do that?" She says, "I would never do that." I says, "You want to go back and live in the time of the Mishnah?" She said, "I don't think so." I'll read you, and you'll see why. It says this: "Kol hakelim hanitalim b'Shabbat, shivrehem nitalim imahem." Any utensils that you could use on Shabbat. Let's say you have a jug, bowl, a pot, and it broke on Shabbat. We're talking about clay pots, or clay or glass, and they broke on Shabbat. Now you can't use it, right? Now, what do we do when something breaks, Shabbat or not Shabbat? Sweep it and throw it to the garbage, right? They say, no, you don't throw anything away. You could still use the shards for something. So as long as you could use it, you could take it, you could move it around on Shabbat. For example, bilvad shiyu osin me'an melacha, but there has to be something specific that you could do with it. For example, shivrei areva lechasot bahen et piyeh havit. If a big bowl broke, if you have a piece big enough that you could cover with it a small barrel, as a lid. Why use a lid when you have a broken piece of clay, right? So you use it as a lid. Shivrei zechuchit lechasot bahen et piyeh pach. And if glass was broken, you could take a little piece of glass and put it on top of the bottle as a stopper. Not as a stopper, more just it's lying flat on top to prevent dust and dirt from coming in. Rabbi Yehuda Omer bilvad sheyehu osim me'en melachtan. Says it's not enough that they can be used for anything. It has to be something that is similar to the original task performed by them. For example, shivrei areva latzuk letochan mikpa v'shel zechuchit latzuk letochan shamen. If a bowl broke, the piece has to be big enough that it can contain mikpa. Mikpa is jelly that they did not make from jello. They made it from fat. It was basically molten fat that coagulated. So they would put it in that. So if you could use it like some kind of a plate, it's okay. And if it's broken glass, if you could fill in a little bit of oil in it and keep it aside, that's fine. A word of caution, of course, don't do this today. If you have anything at home that's cracked, throw it away. It's not worth it. A friend of ours had a vase that started cracking. She didn't realize. Or she knew and she didn't want to throw it away. She picked it up. It broke in her hand, slashed her finger, her thumb. She went to surgery. It took her months to recover.
You would think that they're much more concerned about the work that is involved in cleaning it up,
Yes,
rather than the purpose of the.
it's true. It's true. It was not easy to clean up. Right.
It's a bizarre way of thinking.
Right. That's why I'm saying that when we read the Mishnah, and sometimes you see that the same language of the Mishnah was copied, not by Maimonides. Maimonides was careful not to take verbatim from the Mishnah and put it in his halakha book. But the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch sometimes did that. And the problem is that it's a completely different reality. They also, like Elias is saying, when you have, at the time of the Mishnah, when they speak of something that's spilled on the floor is covered with dirt, with dust. They say don't sweep it because you're digging, you're plowing, you can't plow on Shabbat. For them, washing the floor was spritzing water so the dust will settle down. And so you have glass or something like that, you push it aside, you cover it, anyway you cannot pick up everything. It becomes, after a while, like just a dump that is being pressed down by people walking on it. So that's important to have in mind.
The other thing, Rabbi, is that the relevance of this in modern day, because now you can use, now the kelim that you would use to clean up, for example, might be electric.
Might be Roomba.
Roomba, whatever. So, the relevance of this is...
right. We're not... So, obviously, that's what I'm saying. What we're learning from here is not how to use something that broke on Shabbat, but the whole concept of Muktzeh, for them, that there is something that you set aside and you say, I don't want to use it. So, the real definition, and when we go later on to Shulchan Aruch and we'll go to the halakha, the rule of thumb definition of what is Muktzeh, what is not Muktzeh on Shabbat is this. If there is something that automatically, subconsciously, you will never think of using on Shabbat, you should not touch it on Shabbat because it's Muktzeh, you didn't want to use it. If there's something that you specifically thought I'm going to use it, of course, you could use it. And whatever falls in between, that is questionable, that's up to you. If you live in Israel, for example, one classic example, you live in Israel where most people don't have dryers and they put laundry outside, right? Usually, if the laundry doesn't dry on Shabbat, you cannot bring it in. But if it starts raining, you would be able to bring it in. Why? Because obviously you had in mind when you put it out, you want it to dry and not to be soaking wet, and with the addition of all the pollution that comes from with the rain and goes in the clothes. So that's where you have to use your judgment. Not everything could be codified in the clear book of law, but we'll go into Shulchan Aruch in the following sessions. Baruch Adonai.